And welcome back. Our final conversation this morning is with Dr. Osman Martinez. He is a Chief Executive Officer in the Ministry of Economic Development. And our discussion this morning will be about the Global Climate Fund and, of course, the robust readiness and aggressiveness implementation. Good morning,
Good morning,
Doc.
to you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again.
Yeah,
I feel like this is my home.
your second home. See you. Let's begin by getting a basic understanding of what we mean by robust readiness in the context of climate funding and perhaps what is taking place globally with climate change and how it affects us as a country.
Okay, first of all, what is readiness? So readiness is a fund that the Green Climate Fund do give to all the small island development states in an annual basis, which is the sum of $1 million US. Some countries decide not to use it because you still have to write the proposals and you have to go through all the loopholes, all the challenges and constraints. In addition to that, every nation has limitations in terms of finding project specialists, in terms of finding monitoring and evaluation persons. Nonetheless, what we have done is I said to my team, listen, this is an opportunity for us to create jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, so the readiness does not lend itself to create or to develop projects as per se, solid projects, construction, purchasing of vehicle, but it do lends itself to help in terms of developing manuals, as support to the NDA, which is my office, the National Designated Authority to the GCF. So let me tell you what we have done with the readiness so that you can understand why is it that GCF was so attractive to come to Belize and to send the consultants and to do the study case here in Belize. So one of the things that I did was, we will create jobs. And so to get the story, the full picture of what we have done is, when I was appointed at the Ministry of Economic Development, I was tasked that we need to mobilize climate finance. And therefore, when you look at Belize, didn't have any movements of climate finance. So I asked the technical staff at the Ministry of Economic Development, which is I have the best staff within the government of Belize.
Yeah.
And so I asked, I said, what is the challenge? So they say, GCF is very complicated, and they gave me the rundown. So I asked for a meeting with the executive director of GCF and their technical staff, the regional manager of GCF, and I asked, what is it that Belize needs to do? And so they explained that, Belize needs to develop the proper structure in order to mobilize finance. I'm like, okay, how do we get that done? Say, well, some of it you can use the readiness funding. And I said, okay. So that's how now we have created jobs by what? How? First is we have a lot of consultants in a 2 years basis, helping us with communication, helping us doing the gap assessments for the Ministry of Economic Development to become accredited. We have a few working in the accreditation of DFC. DFC will be accredited. We are hoping that we can submit the final documentation to GCF for the next Board of Governors meeting, which will take place in the middle of July. And then DFC will be accredited. We have PAC that is accredited now. And then we have the Belize Social Investment Fund, which will also be accredited. And based on the gap assessment, there were a lot of different manuals that needed to be completed. So we're saying, okay, we will use these funds now to hire local consultants, young professionals and technocrats to assist in developing the manuals. And so we have different programs within the Ministry of Agriculture with FAO from the UN, with the Blue Economy, Ministry of Blue Economy, within the Ministry of Economic Development, DFC, PAC with 5Cs, and with the Resilient Rural Belize program. So in total, in 2022, we generated 135 jobs at an average income of $50,000 per year just from the Readiness.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they were like, wow. You know, so they came here and said, you know, we need to know if what the Readiness is doing now is fine with you all, or should we make some changes? Of course, I suggested some changes.
It's only right, because as you go along, you find areas where you could expand or tweak on certain existing.
So how do we measure the sustainability of these projects, and how are you measuring the results in order to perhaps create another proposal for next year?
Okay, we are in phase one.
Okay.
Yeah. Our hope now is to move on into including the sustainability component, which are to turn everything into real projects. So let me do it by phase, and I will give you 3 different phases.
Sure.
With DFC, so we're developing the proper structure to mobilize concessionary funds for the private sector.
Okay.
So that will have a sustainability component, because there is no risk that DFC will take, but there is a huge impact that will be moving on to the private sector. And what are the benefits? It will be low access to finance in a time when we have the highest cost of finance in our global global architectural design that we presently have. So if we can mobilize, if we have the ability to mobilize finance at 0.018%, and I will say it again because I did not make a mistake, 0.018%,
Okay.
you know, is actually free finance, you know, that we will be able to pump into the private sector. But to get there, there's a lot of work that needed to be done.
Sure.
And we will still need to do a lot more work, you know, have all the structure in place to get the job done. So that's one. 2, you have PAC. PAC is already mobilizing finance. So PAC is mobilizing finance with the Green Climate Fund, with the Adaptation Fund, and I believe that they might be helping in mobilize finance with the GEF, which is the Global Environmental Fund. So that is an asset. In addition to that, we have the multilaterals, you know, such as Carballo, CDB, the World Bank, IDB, who have become accredited now to mobilize funds and finance from GCF, okay? But they're doing more of a regional projects. So with Carballo, for example, we have, there is an approval for an adaptation fund, which should be a direct impact that it will have in Monkey River. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we work with them. And what is the advantage of working with the multilaterals is that they have the funding. So whenever we have to do the project preparation facility, I mean, there is a lot of little tricks that you have to learn in the system. And one of them is we don't have 1.5 million US dollars to invest on studies on a project.
They do.
They do.
So you have to capitalize on their
Yeah.
resources.
Exactly. So we partner with them. And we also ask them to partner with local entities. So
Right.
they're starting to work along with DFC, with 5Cs. We haven't made the connection with PAC as yet, but our hope is that we will also integrate PAC so that we can have a very good spiderweb connection.
Yeah.
You know, but they do have the funds, so we will say, you know what, we will submit a concept note. This is the project that we want to do. This is, it will cost maybe 1.5 million US dollars for the studies. they have the funds, we get the job done.
So
It's
one
interesting.
of the things that I really, and I know you have to do phase 3, but I wanted to tap into that part that you said you're you know, promoting jobs, you're creating jobs. And one of the jobs that we need that we don't necessarily have are persons to do the groundwork research.
Right.
So how does this particular fund make that happen for us? We have a lot of researchers in Belize, but they don't get jobs because they're not able to, you know, get hired for that particular research. So how does this fund help?
Well, we have started our first research with the University of Belize, which have a few professors from the university with students that are doing a research.
Yes.
And so that is the beginning. Our hope is that, well, that research was focused only on tomatoes,
Yeah.
but our hope is that the first hope that we have is that the tomatoes research will be a continuous research. Secondly, that we can diversify more into other products, fruits and vegetables, but also into technology. You know, for example, how reliable is it to have electric vehicles in Belize? What is the cost per mile? How much would it cost if we will get the energy from BEL versus if we would buy solar panels and be self-sustainable? So all these things are things that we do have in the pipeline in our research agenda for climate change, adaptation and mitigation. So that is in the pipeline. And one of the other components that we have is that we are involved in academia. So we are working closely with the University of Belize. We're working closely with Galen University, and at a regional base, the UNCCC works very close with UWI. Nonetheless, we feel that UWI also, there are ways on how we should be involved in the UWI Open Campus of Belize a little bit more on those research.
I asked about the name in itself, because I know you're talking about robust readiness, but the aggressive implementation of climate finance projects. Belize is one of the countries that are in the forefront for you know, climate change readiness. But what are the essentials that we haven't covered yet, and how does this funding tie into these projects?
Oh, we are in the beginning phase. We are in terms of climate finance. However, we have been aggressive because, May 10th of this year, I will have 2 years at the Ministry of Economic Development. But since we got there, it's like, okay, you know, all projects that we're sitting on, we have to get them to work. You know, that was a mandate that I was given. We have to get the job done. I mean, there is not we will, you know, is we are getting the job done.
They have
So
to.
we have to. Yeah, and
An
so
obligation.
yes, in terms of the public sector investment program, our implementation rate has increased almost by 40% when compared to 2019, because 2020 was an abnormal year due to COVID-19. So if we compare it to 2020, we will be doing an injustice to ourselves. And so we did to 2019, and it has increased by almost 40%. Climate finance was zero movements of dollars in terms of climate finance. No, we have a pipeline of almost $250 million. Okay, and our hope is that we will get our first approval of $20 million through 5Cs this coming Board of Governors, which will take place in July, middle of July. And so that will be one of our biggest grant or donation, or, and I even call it.
Does it look optimistic or favorable at this point? Is it something that you're working towards consciously?
It is 99.9% favorable, because before it gets to the Board of Governors, it goes through a rigorous process.
Yeah. Okay.
So most of the time, when it goes to the Board of Governors, it's mostly for the formality, you know. And then, and of course, you know, if they have any questions, in this case, 5Cs and myself, we will have to be available to respond to any questions and defend it, you know. But absolutely, it looks favorable.
Is it more than necessary now? for the Ministry of Economic Development to tap into the climate finance funds?
Belize is one of the countries with the highest vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. According to the World Bank, Belize ranked 8th out of 172 countries in terms of impacts to hurricanes, droughts, flood, and the three items that I mentioned just now, or the 3 points that I mentioned, have a huge impact in every sector that we can think of in Belize. So, for example, the agro-productive sector will be affected, the service sector will be affected, the tourism sector is being affected, with the sargassum. So that is a huge issue. And so, but what we fail to understand is that climate change has a mega appetite to the point that it has swallowed some islands such as Monkey River. So it come with a big appetite, to the point that Monkey River was almost a tongue in the past and now is in the merge of disappearing. And it is important to note that while we think about climate change, we are not thinking about climate change refugees.
Yeah.
And therefore, when you look, for example, again, at the people of Monkey River, what was a prime piece of land that they had back in the 70s and 80s,
Has all but washed away.
Yeah.
all has been washed away, and they had to move away.
Relocate.
And they didn't, and what they knew as their home, what they have inherited from their parents and grandparents, it was swallowed by the mega appetite of climate change. Therefore, we have climate change refugees in Belize.
Yeah.
And so, my personal position, when I face any agent that have to do with climate change and climate finance, is that climate finance that is coming to Belize is not that they're helping us, is what is deserved, what they should be given to us, what the Belizean people deserve.
Yeah.
In addition to that, Belize have a robust protection of the environment system to the point that Belize is a carbon sink. So we need to understand and be clear that Belizeans need to be paid for the socioeconomic natural wealth that we have. And that money should be used to impact our education system, health system, infrastructure, citizen security, sports, etc.
But how do you balance that, CEO? And I would imagine a rigorous task in itself, where you are tasked to ensure that there is economic development, which means that you have to move forward industrially, technologically, and so forth, and you have to be able to, like you said, create jobs. How do you balance that with also ensuring that there is a safe environment for all of that to take place? 60% of our country is natural reserve.
Right.
How do you keep your 60% natural reserve and create new infrastructure at the same time?
It's tough. It's not an easy task. However, I think what the Briseño administration has been doing is a true example of the way how we need to move forward. So, for example, in terms of infrastructure, when we look at infrastructure, for example, in Europe, Asia, the United States, Canada, even Mexico, even Guatemala, right? I mean, we don't have infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at the Halova Bridge, I mean, we had a bridge there, I don't know how old it is when we think about the swing bridge that is 100 years old. So there is a lot of room to do infrastructure and to redo it the right way. You know, even our roads, you know, main highways.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the Western Highway, one of the most dangerous highways that we have in Belize, and I'm not talking from just to say it's dangerous, but the data is there to back me up where there are so many accidents.
Yeah.
And so there's still room of a lot of infrastructure work that needs to be done. But in everything that the government does, there is a sustainability component, you know, because you can have development, but what is the sustainability?
Right.
I mean, development, investments on development is expensive, but sustainability is more expensive because sustainability is for life.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is all that the Department of Environment is asking, you know. Show me your sustainability component, that how will you mitigate or be able to adapt to issues that will not affect our natural wealth or the socioeconomic that we have within our natural wealth.
So as we move from phase 1, phase 2, and now we're going to roll out these climate projects, what are we looking forward to?
Well, within the pipeline, we have some. What we learn is that it takes the same energy, the same experts, and almost the similar amount of resources to mobilize $1 million or mobilize $50 million.
Yeah.
So our hope is that we will still use the readiness. Nonetheless, our main focus is to develop big projects. Okay, and so in phase 3, we're doing 3 things in parallel. One of the things is big projects. 2 is capacity building. So with Canary, they were here, and we're doing a regional program, which is to do capacity building. So one of the limitations that Belize have is project managers, monitoring and evaluation specialists, and project proposal specialists. So based on that, we need to work with academia. We need to work with our international partners to help us build what we need. But why with academia? Academia, to me, is the most important asset that any nation can have.
You're tapping into brain power.
Exactly.
People who have the qualification to
And academia produce the demand, the supply for the demand in the labor force. So it becomes a key and a strategic partner for any nation.
So finally, as we wrap up, CEO, when can we see the rollout of phase 1, 2, and 3? Do you have a timeline already in order?
Well, phase 1, when we look at accreditations, for example, and developing the proper structures, DFC, well, PAC is already a testimony of what we have done on phase 1. DFC, our hope is that the consultants will complete the work by and that we will be able to submit all the documentation for their accreditation by the middle of July of this year. In terms of the Ministry of Economic Development and SIF, it will take a little bit longer because we just completed the gap assessment for the Ministry of Economic Development, and SIF is about 1 step ahead of the Ministry of Economic Development. And the third one is looking at the phase 3 is to look at the projects, which hopefully we will get our first project by July of this year, our first big one. You know, I mean, 20 million, it will be the biggest one. But we also have already in the pipeline some with the World Bank and PFP, which will be about 12 million US dollars. So in total, this year alone, Belize will be mobilizing and hopefully implement about 25 million US dollars for climate finance. And next year, our hope is that we will be around 40 to 65 million US dollars. And by year 25, we should be around 250 million US dollars, because the projects that we are working on, there are big projects.
Oh, I can't wait to hear the reports of your results, because I'm going to look out for that. But CEO Dr. Martinez, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Best of luck with your projects, and I hope you come back to, you know, roll it out, market it right here on OIE.
It will be my pleasure.
Thank you so much. With that, we are going to take our final break, and we'll be back for wrap-up. Stay with us.
Thank you.